How's it going, everyone? And welcome back to another episode of Sip Talk, another Tsipolitics special. And joining us today, a Senate candidate in the great state of Maine, an independent, Tiffany Bond, joins the show today. Tiffany, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
So Tiffany, do you kind of want to just kind of start and go over your story? You're an independent running for Senate in Maine. We know that you ran for the second congressional district in Maine in 2018, and you just kind of like talk about your story and how you got into politics and why you felt the need to get into politics.
Sure. So I'm sort of an odd duck in politics. I'm not somebody who needs money or attention or power the way a lot of political candidates do. I certainly don't have the thin skin that seems to be very present in political candidates. But I am an attorney, and I've been an attorney for several years, and I noticed that the law was getting worse, like objectively worse. Not like, oh, I don't like this, it's maybe not my cup of tea, just worse. And I started reaching out to congressional representatives, and not just U.S. House, but all. Maine has four. We have two House reps and we have two senators, like every state. And I just wasn't getting responses that were very specific or paid attention. So in 2018, in particular, there was one House rep, Bruce Poliquin, and when I started paying a little bit better attention, and I already was working with the law, so I already sort of knew what was coming and what to look out for. I started looking at his statements and matching them up with the policies he was talking about. And I came to the conclusion that one of two things was happening. He was either purposefully misleading people, or he wasn't reading a thing he was voting on. Now, I'm going to be more generous in my characterization and guess that he wasn't reading it and that he was getting notes that were maybe inadequate from interns that probably shouldn't be making recommendations. But it could have been the other way. And it truly doesn't really matter. What hit me is that we have people who don't pay attention to the law that are writing it, and that's terrifying. So I ran in 2018 after getting really frustrated and not getting the responses. And my goal was, I want to find a way to run in politics without it feeling fundamentally icky. And I want this person who is making law and making my job more difficult to stop doing that. And along the way, I had some really interesting run ins. Like, I was on a TV show called 207. So Maine is one of those states that has the same area code. It's 207 for the whole state. Not sure how much longer that's going to last. We're starting to run out of numbers, but right now we're still all 207. And one of the hosts of the show was like, "Do you think that people really want legislators who read stuff before they vote on it? They have people for that." And I was like, "You think people want legislators that vote on stuff they haven't read?" And apparently the answer was yes to that. So I was like, well, I kind of think we should probably read stuff before we vote on it. And that's really the job description. But that's not what a lot of our legislators do. A lot of our legislators spend money fundraising. It's become a multi-million-dollar industry. If you look at the Maine Senate race this year, there's probably $100 million that is going to be spent at least. I mean, just last quarter, one of the candidates raised $31.1 million, which is astonishing for somebody who doesn't pay their interns. But I digress. Yeah, anybody listening, I can see the faces of the hosts, and they are fantastic after that comment. So yeah, there's a lot of money, and one of the things that I pointed out in 2018 is, look, if I want to fundraise $1 million and I take a couple weeks off a year like a regular person, and I work 40 hours a week. If I want to raise $1 million a year, that's $500 an hour that I have to fundraise. So, and that's only if I need a million. Most congressional campaigns are millions and millions and millions of dollars, and in the House it's only a 2-year term. It's a little bit better in the Senate, but it's a 2-year term. So basically, that's your job. If you need 2 million or more dollars, like, how are you going to be able to do the work? And the answer has become, well, you outsource it. But you outsource it to who? I mean, to interns, because you have a limited budget. Okay, well, who's the intern? People who have their life experience paid for and supplemented by their parents, because nobody can live on the $30,000 a year or whatever it costs, or whatever the interns are paid. That's not what it costs to live in DC. Yeah, so apparently that's who's suggesting our policy. And a lot of the bills are presented by lobbyists. And so there's very little actual legislating done by legislators. And I thought that that was bad and we shouldn't do that anymore. Kind of a roundabout way to get to how did I run. And then I ended up running this year because the mechanism, which we can talk about later, that I came up to run, um, it was logistically challenging in that I was running for a U.S. House seat in a legislative district that has 375 towns. And so, I ask people to support businesses and not for profits, but having them cross reference that with a list of 375 towns is perhaps slightly cumbersome. So I just wanted a statewide race. And so if you say, well, I want to run in a statewide race and I only like federal law, that pretty much means you're running for Senate.
You want to talk at all about how most people's second Twitter accounts are burner accounts with fake usernames and fake names so they can yell at people, and your second Twitter account is breaking down law?
I might have a problem. So I'm a law nerd. And so I'm not wonky the same way a lot of politicos you see on TV are. I like to go through the law and turn it into kind of plain English and explain it to my clients. As a divorce attorney, I have to do that all the time. So I have to say, well, the statute, instead of reading the statute, which even if they're written in air quote plain English, they're not plain English. I have to convert law to everyday conversation all the time. And so one of the things I noticed about the job interview is that we don't, we have this very important, very all grown up, very responsible job. Like, this is a big job. Make the country's law. That seems kind of important. And the job interview that we have is basically a game show. It's not a great way to determine that you know how to do the job, right? The job is serious and boring and full of post-its and paper cuts and requires hours of reading thousands of pages of tediously small typed print that is dry and requires agonizing cross-referencing. But the job interview is how obnoxious can you be in as few of words as possible, and what ridiculous crap can you do to get airtime? And so none of that shows that you know how to read law, that you know how to process law, that you know how to edit law. It just doesn't show it. So I actually have done what would be sort of like a work sample, I guess, if you were interning or interviewing for a job. And I said, here's me breaking down the laws. And oh, well, we're at it. I'm going to break down some federal laws and I'll break down some state laws. And for the state laws, while we're at it and I'm showing you this really bad law, go ahead and email your state legislators and tell them to change the stuff because it's bad and we shouldn't do it anymore. So, for example, things from why are we putting people in jail for drinking in public? So in Maine, we have a high tourist population. So what that means is the people who get put in jail are not the jerks who show up with lots of money on a boat and get plastered and then stumble back to their boat. We arrest people who are homeless and unemployed and they scrounge together $2 to get Mike's Hard Lemonade, and we arrest them for that. So that's not very humane. And it costs taxpayers a lot. It's like abusive to both the person you're arresting and the taxpayers for spending $30 or $40 a day to jail those folks. So, hey, take care of that. And habitual offender laws are awful. Write your state legislature about that. So yeah, if you follow my accounts, you'll see that I'm often talking about law. I'm sort of a mix of here's a few momisms and here's some pragmatic tips and here's how I feel about this policy and please write your legislature about this one. And I might periodically make fun of like Scott Baio or something too.
It's pretty apparent that you are not like most politicians. I don't even know if you would, you're in politics, so I guess you would have to self-describe as a politician. But could you talk a little bit about, well, you are. As much as people who are not born into politics like to say, if you are in politics, you are in fact a politician. Could you talk a little bit about Maine raising and just how much radical this idea seems, but at the same time, it's significantly more productive than throwing away money at a candidate?
Sure, I can do that, but you know what? I'm going to move your interview around and I'm going to take over a little bit because that's what moms do. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with ranked choice voting because that enables Maine raising. And so if we start with Maine raising, it's kind of a backwards way to get to ranked choice voting. And ranked choice voting is really the place to start. So Maine has ranked choice voting, and what that means is it's like you go to the store and you say, I'd like some ice cream. I really want mint chip. Crap, they're out of mint chip. I guess I'll take Rocky Road. Ugh, no Rocky Road either. Well, give me vanilla and I'll mix some toppings in at home. And so we rank our candidates here. And in order to be elected, you have to have 50% or more of the votes in the round that you're being voted on. And so for the first round, if nobody gets 50%, you move on to a next round. If somebody gets 50%, you're done. That person wins. So for example, in 2018, Angus King was an independent who ran for the Senate, wildly popular, easily cruised past 50%. Though people were allowed to rank their choices, it didn't go into ranked choice voting. The race I was in with Bruce Poliquin, an approximately equal number of people found Poliquin and Golden to be the lesser of two evils, but not sufficient that either side had more than 50% that found those two to be the lesser of two evils. So since it didn't have 50%, it went into next round picking. And what that allows is it allows me to run campaigns where I can say, look, we have a different system here. So if you want to take a leap of faith with every other voter and say, we want to get money out of politics, there is something you can do in every election that is free and comes with no political risk, and that's voting. Because in every other election, across the country, if you don't vote for one of the party candidates, you get to hear from the party how you are a ruiner and how dare you vote for that spoiler, you meanie head. And you are politically illegitimate for voting for what you think the best thing is because you didn't vote for the least annoying of the two most annoying things. And we don't do that in Maine. So it's great because it allows me to go on TV. And I've never paid for a TV spot, and I really didn't get a lot of air coverage this year, which is pandemic related. And I don't want to kill too much time on because it'll just sort of remind us all that we can't leave our house anymore. But in 2018, I got a lot of airtime, and I just said, you can vote for me. It's free. If you really truly believe that you don't want money in politics, if you don't want money in politics, you're done with it, you can vote for me. It doesn't cost a thing. And then if not enough people agree with you, that's fine. You can vote for the Democrat or the Republican or whoever you think is the next most qualified. So I always tell people, if you want money out of politics, vote for me as number one, and then rank everybody else that you find palatable. You don't have to rank everyone. And so in 2018, I got 5.7% of the vote, which is a lot of votes. It was like 16,552 first round votes. And I haven't added in the second or third round votes, but that's how many I got in the first round. And I spent less than $800. So I spent less than a nickel a vote. So that was fun. Comparing it to the two major candidates that were closer to $30 a vote, that's a big gap, right? and how I did that is I said, when I started running, I said, I need a way to tell people that there's this campaign available, but I don't want it to be icky and I don't want to ask for money. One of the things that really, really bothers me is how we talk about money. So since Citizens United, it's become, these corporations can spend millions of dollars and we have to fight them in this David and Goliath battle. And the folks who have no money have to give $3. Give us your $3, which is just way too much like the paper boy from Better Off Dead for me, but it really abuses people who don't have any money. It says, hey, your life's in the balance, but in order to save it, you need to take $3 out of the money you need to spend on rice, which is the only staple you can afford, and give it to me so that I can blow it on commercials that nobody watches and flyers that nobody reads, so that we can, instead of an election, have an auction and we can get the most money and we can win. But that's not how democracy fundamentally should work. So I wanted to get us away from that because it's just gross, right? It's wasteful, it's gross, it's icky, like in Maine. So I mentioned earlier, we have one candidate that has $31.1 million for one quarter. The other candidate has, quite a bit too. So between them, they have around 40 million for one fiscal quarter. And if Maine is a very cheap media market. So if you can imagine, literally every time you turn on the TV, every commercial break has one, if not two commercials for that race. Every time you turn on YouTube, your phone, my husband has a little car game on his phone that had never had an ad, and an ad popped up in that too. I mean, like everything has ads on it right now. There was one day last week where I got 16 mailers about the race, and each one of those costs about $1. So I'm like, hey, you could like pay interns, several of them, for a whole day with this. The amount of media exposure it buys in Maine, it's just saturated. Like we have hit the point where there have been articles like there's nowhere left for them to spend money. They just can't physically find places to put the money, yet they're still fundraising money. So we need to get out of that system. And I thought, well, how do I channel that energy? Because a lot of people do care about these races and want to throw money at them. How do I channel that energy and put it into something that it doesn't get icky, that I don't touch, that I can't be compromised anyway, and that's ethical, that's useful, that's productive, and goes back in our community. And so what I came up with is for people to take the same amount of money they want to give to me, whether it's $3, $3,000, I don't care how many dollars, and instead shop at a small business or donate to a Maine charity. And there's a lot of ways to do that. There's some actual, like charities you can go on their donation page, or for example, Donors Choose lets you pick any classroom in Maine and help them fund some projects. And especially because we're all virtual right now, almost all of them have a comments or instructions or notes section, and you just put, hey, Tiffany Bond is running for the United States Senate. She refused to take my money and asked that I invest in the community. Look her up. Make it a positive, upbeat message. And you make sure to use the hashtag Maine raising. And so it's one of those things where if 5 people do it, the world's a little better. That's nice. But say 100,000 people do it. I mean, that's race changing, right? It's so much better. 100,000 people could give $3 to a Senate campaign that chases you around every day telling you that they want your $3. Or you could donate to a charity or help a teacher or buy an artisanal soap. Or, I mean, Maine makes almost anything. So, like, if you want custom made moccasins, you can get them. If you want a hand carved chessboard, I bought one of those myself this year because we're trapped inside with board games. There's so much that Maine produces, and most of it is fantastic. One other feature that makes Maine very different than other states, on top of being an inexpensive media market, is we have very small towns, and a lot of them. So I live in Portland, Maine, which is the most populated city in the state, and we have 67,000 people, and that's it. The next most populous cities are around 30,000, and there's just a handful of those. And really, most of our cities are towns, and they're fewer than 1,000 people. So we have hundreds of towns with fewer than 1,000 people in it. And so you really only have to hit maybe 5 or 6 small businesses in each town. And then that's the gossip for the town. So you can use gossip for a positive force. You can invest in communities. And because you're always getting a market value transaction, whether it's a donation to a not-for-profit and you get that tax write-off, or a purchase at market rate and you get the thing, there's no actual political spending. You're spending money that you would have spent on a donation and just basically set on fire, but instead you're getting something for it. You're helping someone, you're getting a great product, whatever it is. So it was a way to really help the community to keep it squeaky clean. Maine has a clean elections funding system, but it doesn't apply to federal races. So it's kind of its own little federal elections, federal clean elections. And it's a great way to invest in things. So, when people do it, it becomes really fun. If you go on to my Twitter page, you'll see that every once in a while there's this thread that pops up that's been going since April of 2019, where we just, for a few days at a time, will periodically fund teachers. Like, all right, there's a donor match at Donors Choose, and let's see how many classroom projects we can fund. And we funded hundreds of classroom projects and brought a lot of teachers on board as advocates for the campaign, which is great. And we've helped a lot of small businesses. We've helped a lot of people that are establishing. It's a great way to help the community, and I literally have no connection to any of these people, which makes it so much more fun. It's serendipitous. It's like a little Maine raising fairy comes down and helps you.
Like,
I love that just because I mean I currently live in Arizona and we have a pretty heated Senate race right now, and we have one candidate who said she told supporters to, hey, do you need to spend that $6 on dinner when you can give it to me so we can win and help Arizona, just so she could spend that money on ads when I play Among Us on my phone. So I actually really like the Maine raising. I love kind of using a campaign to give back to the community. And I also think that would get a lot of young people to show up and be more involved in politics, because I think something that really doesn't attract young people with politics and in elections is just the begging for money. And it's like, yeah, I'm a college kid trying to pay rent and I'm eating ramen noodles, and yeah, like you're expecting me to give a bunch of money to your campaign. But I don't want to say it kind of just goes after their fears of, yeah, but if you don't give money to my campaign, then after you graduate, you're not going to have a job, and just kind of plays to those young people fears. And I really think that that type of campaigning will actually get more young people to go out and vote, even though a lot of people are doing that now, and just being more involved within their local community within politics.
Yeah, and I mean, if you have candidates listening to this, steal it. Use it in your own races. If we can convert campaign season from, oh my goodness, I'm going to need to start day drinking, to, wow, it's campaign season. Like what great products are we going to buy? Like what wonderful charities are we going to support? Hey, domestic violence numbers have been trending in the wrong way. Let's get some shelters funded. If we could actually use campaigns as a way to quantify how much each candidate wants to help the community instead of how much they want to burden them with ads that make us want to drill our own skulls out, that would be awesome. Like we could look forward to it. It would be exciting to have big elections every couple of years. That would be something I would want to do. And then you'd want to turn on the TV, and then maybe you wouldn't mind the handful of commercials, because instead of hearing about how so and so has a dark money overlord, we could hear about how so and so, helped keep a food bank able to sustain through the end of the year. I mean, it could just be so much better.
I just had a flashback to the 2018 midterm election in Arizona, because every single ad on Hulu was the Martha McSally attack ad going, Kirsten Sinema is too radical for Arizona. Like I just had that ingrained into my mind. I knew it by heart, and oh God, what a time to be alive in Arizona.
If you look at my right now, my pinned tweet on Twitter, and it's not my only medium that I use, but I use it a lot for reasons that are both that's where politics have gone, but also Maine, it's hard to find good data. I mean, I'm here with you today and I can see you guys on video, but I'm just using audio because even though I pay 80 something dollars a month for internet, I still can't run 3 video feeds at a time because Maine just doesn't have great data. But you'll see the video clip that I have right there. It's like the two party candidates are just bickering over nothing that has anything to do with anything anybody in Maine cares about. And I'm like, hey, this is why we're getting nothing done in politics, and I'd really love a question. And it's just astonishing to watch in Maine, like they fight over Nancy Pelosi, who is, last time I checked, not actually in Maine.
so I believe is that Bruce Poliquin? Poliquin? I don't know much about Maine, but I
Yeah,
believe
that clip's
right?
Bruce Poliquin and Jared Golden. I haven't gotten any clips that were that much fun this year. So I followed the governor's orders and CDC practices, which meant that I wasn't able to get adequate signatures to get on the ballot. So I'm having to run write-in. So I was excluded from most of the I was in some forums, but I was excluded from the debates, which is really disappointing because I am better at debating than most of the people on that stage. So it would have been so much more fun to watch. But yeah, it was. I actually ended up suing the state, but as it turns out, the standard to win is, did they actively try to murder you? Not, was this a reasonable choice to handle access to the ballot in a pandemic, and it only impacted independent candidates because in Maine the party candidate deadline was 15th or 16th of March, and independents had until June. So those two periods of time were not alike. So we have to get independents have to get twice as many signatures, but we have twice as long. So I was over halfway to the signature goal when the pandemic hit, but then we couldn't, like the signatures have to be in ink in person, and they can't be mailed. So and they have to be notarized. So yeah, more hyper detailed than you need to be about Maine, but it was not logistically possible. Like you couldn't be on the Senate ballot this year unless you're at a party or you're a millionaire. You just couldn't.
Do you think you're going to run again?
I don't know. I wanted this to be kind of like I ran once and got to vote for myself on the ballot, and either it worked or it didn't. And please take the model that I developed and run with it, anybody who's interested. But I feel like I didn't really get that opportunity. So I think it's possible. I certainly will advocate for people to be finding alternative ways. I might write some articles about it. I'm not sure. It's very draining to do, especially if you're doing it with your own money. Although this year I still am only a little over $800. So yeah, I'm not
That's
including
incredible.
the $400 filing fee for the lawsuit that I had, but it's still a little over $800 compared to millions of dollars for the rest of the race. So, even so in our race, we have 4 people who have made ballot. We have the Republican, the Democrat, and they are just spending like gangbusters. We have a Green who's at least several $100,000 in, and then we have she's ran as an independent because she couldn't get in as a party candidate. And then we have a rather eccentric millionaire who spent his own money, but he's still got like an RV he's tooling around in that's custom painted. So they're all spending a lot of money. So I would like to. I don't know if it'll time up. I don't enjoy the job interview. The job interview is crap. This is a process that is abusive to voters. It's also abusive to candidates. The way that people treat candidates, particularly female candidates, super fun being called a cunt in front of my children. That was awesome and happened more than once. The messages I get, the threats, it's a lot. A lot. And I have it easier than some because my personality doesn't naturally attract some of the worst. And because I'm not in a party, I kind of avoid some of the worst. It is really heartbreaking for people who are not in Maine and don't understand ranked choice voting to understand that you don't have to hate people for being a different political inclination. People outside of Maine really treat independents like we are not politically valid. Like there is no legitimate political participation other than Democrat or Republican. One of our senators is independent, so we obviously don't believe that here. And he's by far our most popular senator. So it's an interesting process. I don't know if I necessarily want to go through it again, but maybe. Super long way to answer that. Hang on just a second.
No, you're totally fine.
Yeah, I think that if you guys want to keep watching that, you got to go upstairs because I'm on an interview right now. No, but you can go upstairs and think about playing with your Nintendo. Well, your other option is to clean your room. I have to finish this though, and I need silence from both of you. Okay. Sorry, I'm sure that was super
Totally
fun to have.
I might leave that in, honestly.
We had.
You can go upstairs and think about playing with this Nintendo.
I might play with my Nintendo right now. After this, I don't have class for another 2 hours.
We have so many toys for the kids that are both new and dated. So our 9-year-old has a Nintendo Switch, but I also have like original Nintendo games. And then I managed to score one of those like little mini classics when they came out a couple of years ago. I sort of did that on accident. There was a GameStop next to the Starbucks, and I was like, what is everybody in line for? They're like, oh, the new Nintendo Mini, the little gosh, what was it? It was like a mini version of the console. I don't know. I'm awful at game names. So we have that. We have a few other gaming systems, and they don't get to play them very often. They just sit on the shelf and sort of taunt them.
That was our childhood as well. There was a
Yeah.
PlayStation 2 that I convinced my mom to get my dad as a Father's Day gift. He's very anti-video games. So I just wanted to play it. So I
Right.
assumed if we got him a PlayStation 2 that we'd get to play it. And the answer to that was
No.
2 weeks during the summer, maybe, and during Christmas break. So, yeah.
Yeah, we've got a ton of stuff around
But
the house that I get to.
Guess who has the PlayStation 2 in their apartment now? Ah, God.
Yeah, no, we
Get-
have a
get
lot
a
of fun toys
few
around
hours
the
in
house
every
for
day.
them that they get to earn the right to use. Like we just bought a record player because I was talking about records, and they were like, "What are records?" I'm like, "Well, we'll just have to go get one of those now." So we've been having a lot of fun with the retro stuff during the pandemic because what else is there to do?
Same with me. Actually, I started, because our family we weren't big on video games and we didn't get a console till much later. Xander and I, we thrived on playing like free online like flash games on the computer, and so actually just this past weekend, I just had a little bit of nostalgia and just started playing some like classic games. We'd sneak in on the computer, or like you'd play in school because you were done with your project, and you'd play like educational games, but really you were just playing like some free baseball game or platformer. Totally off topic though.
Well,
Um,
it could have been Oregon Trail
It was
because
not
Lord
Oregon
knows we all
Trail.
have dysentery this year.
Xander, do we have Oregon Trail at Clayton, or do they get rid of that, or was it just Zumbinis and hot dog
It was
stand?
just Zumbinis and hot dog stand. It was
How do you
definitely
not
not
have
Oregon.
Oregon Trail? I mean, I'm old, so like I got my first computer when I was 6, and it was a Commodore 64, and it had very exciting games like Potty Pigeon and Montezuma's Revenge that you have never heard of, and that's probably for the best.
Do you have any comment on our friend Bruce's 2018 lawsuit and how he says ranked choice voting is unconstitutional?
Well, he can't really mean it because he pulled his lawsuit.
Oh, he did.
Yeah. No, I mean he didn't appeal the rulings. I love the judge that wrote the opinion, and it's funny. So I don't know him well enough that we're like friends, but I'd been in his courtroom before, and he was very recently promoted to federal bench from state. And so he's a judge with a great sense of humor. He was appointed under the Trump regime. So it was the best possible judge to have written the opinion. And here is, I occasionally will give like snippets that you can save $10,000 on law school tuition. One of them is if a judge uses the word irony more than once about your arguments in an opinion, that's bad. So if you haven't read the opinion, you should. It's pretty entertaining. And Judge Walker wrote it before he'd had any clerks assigned to him. So he wrote it himself. And you can see that if you've been in his courtroom ever, you could read that opinion and be like, oh, yeah, this is all Judge Walker. So
When I was looking this up, I was like dying. I'm like, you're in like this is the system that you guys use is ranked choice voting. Sorry you lost by a percentage. Maybe if everyone didn't hate you so much, you would have won. Because if you look at the breakdown between where yours and the other independent, King, I think was their name, right?
no, Will Hoare.
Well, oh, okay. If you looked at like where those votes went, it was I think 35% didn't even put a second vote, and then like 45% went to the Democrat running, and it was like 13% went to him. So like, sorry.
Yeah, it's not uncommon in Maine for people to no vote races. Like if you look at the Maine Senate race, I would wager a fair amount of apples that if at the end you'll look through it and there'll be a bunch of people that voted for like wrote in me or wrote in me and voted for Lisa or voted for Lisa and then just skip Gideon and Collins, because in Maine, if they don't like you, they just won't vote for you. So part of why we have the ranked choice voting system is the Democrats were getting so frustrated that independents would vote for independents
I
because
mean, yeah,
we
and I
just,
totally, and yeah, and I
it's a
100%,
different voting. I mean, it's a different political ideology.
100%. And I think ranked choice voting allows you to actually vote for who you want without
Right.
being subject to the scrutiny of, oh my God, I guess in the 2016 election, I can't believe you voted for Gary Johnson. Well, that's who I agreed with. Or I
Right.
can't believe Jill Stein, but like,
I didn't vote for Biden as number one.
oh,
It
so
wasn't
is it for federal elections in
all
Maine?
federal elections in Maine. Yeah. So I
Oh,
didn't rank Biden as number one. I did rank him, and I didn't rank Trump because I don't like pathological con artists. But I mean, I'm not opposed to Republicans. I grew up in a Republican household, and there are some Republicans, especially on a local level, that I really like and respect. But I mean, when somebody's been vile for like, I don't know, 6 decades, it's really hard to think that they're going to change ever. So yeah, I didn't rank Biden as my first choice because he wasn't my first choice. I wanted to be able to say, like, I'm glad I got to vote for him as a like backup or whatever, but that's not what I necessarily want as a leader. And I had a lot of Democrats that got really upset with me that I wasn't like stumping hard for Biden because I don't like Trump. And I'm like, okay, you guys have this thing about both siderisms, and that's great, but I have this minimum threshold thing. And so it is possible for one person to be objectively exponentially worse than the other, and for the first person who's not as bad to still not be good enough. And so in Maine, we can express that with our voting.
I 100% agree. And in Massachusetts, it's our second ballot question. So, I mean, I kind of knew what ranked choice voting is because I think they use it in New Zealand, Australia.
Australia.
You can speak to that in a minute. But like I was
I
kind of,
have, yeah, I have a fun PSA that I can send you. I'll send it right now while we're chatting and you can laugh about it. Go ahead, keep
oh,
talking.
wait, yeah. But like, it's just great that, I mean, I don't see any downside to it. And I think it gives, it gives independents a vote and you're not thrown in these two radical corners and just pinned there. It takes away the, oh, you need a vote. And then you're like, okay, I want to vote for the person that I align with the most, who I don't think most people align specifically like 100% with either Trump or I guess Republican or Democratic views. So I think there are a lot of people that want to vote for something in the middle. And there's just this scrutiny that comes along with it where it's, oh, you're not voting for what I want, so you're wrong. Um, so I think it's a great way to give people a voice. It increases collaboration between parties. And I just think it's great all around, and I see absolutely no downside to it.
I'm actually a little surprised nobody from the pro ranked choice voting campaign in Massachusetts contacted me because I have a different insight than I think most people do as to how it can be used as a candidate, but also as a voter. Like I've kind of been in the position of being a voter in ranked choice voting and being a candidate in ranked choice voting. And, it is really, really, really gratifying as both a candidate and a voter to be able to say, not voting for your candidate as number one doesn't mean that I am, a subspecies of human that doesn't give you a vote that you think you're entitled to. I had somebody tell me that if I didn't vote for their candidate, that I was stealing their vote. And I'm like, well, it's my vote. And they're like, well, no, it's, if you're a decent person, you have to vote for this candidate. And I'm like, but it's my vote. I vote for who I find to be qualified. Well, if you're ever going to have progress, you have to vote for my candidate. Well, that's nice that you feel that way, but it's not objectively true.
I mean, and you kind of going back to your ice cream analogy, it's weird because it's like it's one of the few things where if you're going out and choosing something, it's like, what do you mean? There's only two options. That'll be really cool if I get something else. So like, say if you're out getting ice cream, and it's like, what are my options? So we have mint. I'm really not a big mint guy. What's my other option? Oh, a roadkill acorn chip. And it's
Yeah.
like, Well, obviously I'm not gonna buy that, but like there's some cookie dough over there. Yeah, but like you'd be the only one getting cookie dough, and like no one gets cookie dough. It's like, but I like cookie dough. But then you'll be pressured to get the mint, and Lord knows if you pick roadkill acorn chip, it's just like, why would you even choose that? At that point, don't even get any ice cream. But that's not how democracy works. So that's why I love ranked based voting.
Well, it kills me that we aren't really functioning in a democracy right now. I mean, this is not almost any race across the country isn't a democracy. So I have not been shy, and I've gotten a lot of crap for it about how I feel about the way that the Maine Senate race has run this year. There was a field of good candidates that were local and they'd been running for quite some time, and dropped into that was a candidate that was dropped in with the endorsement of the Democratic Senate campaign, and with just millions of dollars. And at that point in time, all of everything to the other candidates turned off. Like, that's not democratic. A bunch of both party events, but also non-party events, just organizational events, got canceled because the preferred candidate didn't participate. And this wasn't an election, this was purchased. And that's not democracy. So when we're throwing these amounts of money at things and there is no functional substance, like, I haven't been shy that I think that neither party candidate has any business being a legislator. And I can say that because they're both legislators. So they both have a history and a record you can look at and go, oh my God, why are we voting for this? Right? I mean, if you look at Susan Collins' voting record, she is a master for politician. I mean, if you could create a love child of a politician and a troll, you would have Susan Collins. She's fantastic at it. She concern trolls politics with a mastery that nobody else does. And everybody, you see these signs going around, like these little memes where she's got like "kick me" on her back. That's what they're by Mitch. Like, she's even convinced the people who hate her that she's somehow kind of the victim when she is like the puppet master. She is brilliant and she wants these policies. She's into it. She wouldn't vote for it if she weren't. She's very capable of being independent from her party and not voting for something she doesn't want. So she just lets the dudes take the fall for it. She's really good at it. And you look at Speaker Gideon's legislative record, and not only is it breathtakingly shallow, a lot of it is very similar to Susan's. They use the same language. They both want, hey, we'd really like Supreme Court justices that support precedent. No, you don't. You want a Supreme Court justice that supports your precedent. You won't want them to support the other precedent. And some of the best decisions we have had in Supreme Court history have been ones that didn't respect precedent. They said this is an injustice that has been going on for, X amount of years or decades, and we have to correct this as the Supreme Court. And that is the opposite of respecting precedent. So, the marketing is similar, the legislation type is similar. They both have a ridiculous amount of bipartisan fluffy / faux holiday bills. They both like to write bills or promote bills that either, don't do anything, or um, they they sort of hold up rights that we already have. Like, thank you for re-legislating this thing that was already legislated before you were born. But, thanks for that. Can we change these things that actually need to be changed? No. And so it's astonishing to me, and I harp a little bit more sometimes on Gideon just because everybody knows what Collins is at this point in time. Well, sort of. They still think that she's the victim. But I look at Gideon's record and she's like, oh gosh, we might have systemic injustice. Well, gosh, golly gee whiz, if you only hadn't been Speaker of the House for almost 8 years, you might have been able to do something about that. And you watch both of their social media accounts and you're like, goodness, if only either one of you knew a legislator to address these horrible things. And they just don't. I mean, we've ended up with a system where you have to pick the person who has the slightly better commercials. because none of them plan to do any of the actual legislating. Was that a nice tangent that was totally not anywhere near?
That was great.
That was a great tangent.
I will rant away.
Xander,
Fine with us.
Xander, do you want to get in here with some rapid fire questions?
Do we want to ask her how to fix America first, or is that too big?
I feel like she's already told us how to fix
Yeah.
America.
So ranked choice voting and donating to charities and local companies instead of politicians.
Yeah,
Did
I
that
mean, you
fix
can
it?
pretty much sum up my campaign in like one sentence, right? It's just not that hard to not be a dick.
Honestly,
That'll be the title
America
of
could
this.
use that right now.
Right?
It could
It's
be the
just not
title
that
of this.
hard. You could at any point in time, you could have a choice and say, do I want to be a dick or not be a dick? And you could say, today I think I will be a dick-free zone.
I have two specific main questions
Sure.
before we get into the rapid fire, which also have quicker answers to main questions.
Xander, can you please show her your T-shirt?
I saw it.
Yeah, I made a T-shirt. It's
I see
the
that.
main question of the week.
Awesome.
So the first question is, did you go to the rally this week?
Which rally?
Our dear
the Trump
president
one?
came to Maine.
Well, I mean, that was really more of like an impromptu COVID party at an after-hours orchard. So no, for a variety of reasons involving it's 2 hours away and potential of death.
Just out of curiosity, like, why did he come to, like, I understand that they're saying that they want to get that
Yeah.
vote, but like, or that, I guess, the electoral vote, but like, is that really what he should be focusing on right now?
I mean, no, but Maine is deceptive. So Maine looks all blue, right? Like we have a blue legislature, both chambers. We have a blue attorney general. We have a blue secretary of state. We have a blue governor. So we look like all blue, but we're not. I mean, Maine is fundamentally purple. And if you look at it really close, there's actually a lot of Trump support in Maine. And actually a lot of my clients and a lot of my supporters are really into Trump too. They know we don't agree on it, and that's okay. They like me anyway. They actually like me for the same reasons they like him, even though we have very little in common. I don't feel very politicky, and I say what I think. I mean, it's way less sexist, racist, and stupid, but I do say what I think. And so I say what I think. I think I'm exponentially more authentic because it's just way too much energy to invent an alternate timeline, and I actually would have to keep a journal to tell as many lies as some people do. But we have a lot of Trump support here. We have a lot of Republicans. We have a phenomenal amount of independents here. I have heard that perhaps they might have slightly more Democratic voter registrations right now, which would be very unusual for Maine. But, check back a month after the election, because a lot of people after the election go right back to independent. They just wanted to vote in a primary. So we have a lot of independent voters here. We have a lot of voters that like neither Republicans nor Democrats. We actually have a lot of swing voters here that are swing for different reasons than people anticipate. So I think if you're in a party, it's really hard to understand how somebody could flip between fairly drastic political positions. If you are an independent, we aren't tied together as a group by policy like Democrats or Republicans are, but you will find common threads that sort of tie us together. So, for example, authenticity is very important to us. If you talk to independents, you'll find that they can really generally tolerate somebody who's further left or further right of us than we would like by quite a lot, as long as we trust them and feel like they're making a good decision based on their moral fiber, right? And I think that is sort of foreign if you're in a party, and we see that, right? We see Republicans sort of twisting themselves in knots to defend things that they would not normally defend, most of them. And they do, it's not just Republicans, Democrats do it too. Like they'll catch one of their candidates doing something really inappropriate and they still are like, well, it could be worse. They could be a Republican. No, like it's still porn in really inappropriate ways, like
Are you
revenge porn
referring to our
still doesn't
friends
make
in
it.
the North Carolina Senate race?
Oh,
Because that
I'm
went
old enough.
totally unnoticed that he was sexting a aide or something, or
Yeah, I mean,
no one
it can.
cares.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to watch because neither party is free from misogyny, neither party is free from affairs, neither party is free from a wide range of really inappropriate things. Neither party is free from the incentive to be inappropriate with campaign contributions or with money generally. Neither party is free from the fact that the Senate and the House are underpaid, and people go, "Oh my gosh, they make like 180,000 a year, or 175,000 a year." It costs an insane amount of money to live in DC, and then you have to maintain a separate residence. And after you pay taxes on that, in some states that means you get a studio apartment in DC, and like a hovel or an apartment back home. And so if you don't if we're in a position where we don't compensate people enough to live in an area where they're required to keep a residence, there are pressures that make both parties do things that are just icky all the time.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. All right. I know you're not originally from Maine, but
I'm not.
these are Maine-centric rapid-fire questions for the most part. So
Okay.
quick one-word answers or 2 words, depending on what it is. We've had someone do rapid-fire questions and take like 3 minutes on it, and I had to explain to him that is not what rapid-fire means.
I'm an attorney, so
Okay.
you might get the 3-minute to 12-minute answer.
Then you'll hear from me. Okay, so of the extreme directional towns in Maine, which is the best? Escort, Kittery, or Lubec?
There's a really good brewing company up in Lubec. Kittery has a trading post. And what was the third one?
Escort, where the border goes through people's backyards.
I'm gonna go with Lubec. It's got much more stunning sunrises than the other two.
And the most eastern point in the United States, unless you want to include Alaska, but that's
right. Yeah.
Because it goes over. But anyway, what is the hardest thing to check off your bucket list?
In Maine?
No, just anything. That
hardest thing to check off your bucket list? Me personally, I've done most of the stuff I want to do. Apparently, winning a Senate race is the hardest thing to check off my bucket list.
That's fair. Choose one: lobsters or blueberries?
Blueberries.
What show are you watching right now?
Well, I have kids, so we've been watching Nailed It.
Nailed It. What is that?
It's a baking show where people try to make things that they do not have the skills to make. And they come up with some incredibly unfortunate outcomes. I mean, if you don't open your eyeballs, yes.
But it'll taste good?
All right. It'll taste good. It'll be the right texture. But I mean, I've got so much on my plate. I'm not going all out on the garnish.
Good to know. Now, can you name the 5 freedoms that are guaranteed by the First Amendment?
The 5 freedoms that are guaranteed by the First Amendment? I probably can. So we've got freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Gosh, I haven't been asked this question from law school, by the way. Freedom of press, freedom to petition and protest, although I think when they teach it, it's assembly.
It is. Congratulations. You know that, and our new nominee for the Supreme Court Justice does not know that. But anyway, what are the 3 best types of apples?
3 best types. If you're cooking, I like a good Jonah Gold. If you're eating, a Honeycrisp, or I really like Spencer apples, which is sort of a niche that you probably don't have where you are.
You know what's so upsetting to hear about Honeycrisp? Like I love Honeycrisp. I think they're my favorite too. But like to find out that they were originally made in a lab in Minnesota, like it just takes away from like the goodness of it.
But they're so crisp.
I
Like they're
know
so
they're
good.
delicious. Just one bite is great sound. If you
You know,
were to kick out one state of New England, which is it?
one state out of New England,
Yes.
for any reason at all,
You kick them out. They're no longer in New England.
can I rank it?
Yes, you can do ranked choice voting
Yes,
for.
absolutely. You can
I
rank it.
mean, I think that I would probably start my list with Massachusetts based on their
Oh,
driving skills and being a little pretentious. And then I think
We're
I'd
only
go to,
pretentious because we've earned to be pretentious, okay?
sure. Um, sorry.
No, that's fine. That's what my friends tell me too when I tell them that.
Well, they just are really impressed with such different things than I am.
like the
Then,
best healthcare and education in the country?
okay. So, I think I would get rid of Connecticut next
Yeah,
because their
they're my
gas
number one.
prices are ostentatious.
And they're basically New
Um,
York.
and they're basically New York, and there is always road construction at like 3 in the morning in like December, and I don't want to be on the road like with all those other vehicles. That's why I'm driving in the middle of the night. So I don't enjoy driving through Connecticut. I think I'd have to, and then the next would be like a tie between Rhode Island and New Hampshire. Vermont's probably the most like Maine. New Hampshire, um, is their, I don't like their family law. It's a little ornery.
Their family law?
Yeah, just the way that some of their statutes and customs are definitely
Is there
not
a
my
least
cup of
favorite
tea.
from you?
Of laws, no, you wanted a short answer.
Sure.
Although Massachusetts, going back to the pretentious, one of the things I love when I've been down in Massachusetts courts is they still have the hear ye guy, and we don't have a hear ye guy, right?
Uh,
Like they start court with hear ye. We don't
and
like.
very rarely in court.
We're just happy you put on pants in Maine.
And finally, and maybe the most controversial, what is the best brewery in Maine?
I'm actually allergic to hops, so I don't drink beer. I do enjoy hard cider.
What is the best hard
And
cider in Maine?
I, even though politically we disagree on some stuff, Riker Hill has a really good cider that they make.
Good to know.
Should probably do some research on our guests to make sure,
I
they
don't
know
think
that they're.
hops allergy is not showing up in Ballotpedia.
It
Yeah,
could.
that's.
I mean, I didn't see it, but I was gonna say Allagash, but she's allergic to hops, so I feel like this whole interview has been ruined.
I mean, my husband will drink all of them, so I think one of his saddest things is that I don't drink beer with him. But I think that now that cider is much more prevalent than it was when we got together. I mean, we've been married for 15 years, so artisanal cider, is so much more posh now and more available. So we have an easier time going out now in our usually once a fiscal quarter date night that my mother flies out for. That has not happened because dates are now not allowed.
Tiffany,
Do you think
if you become a senator, can you limit the amount of hard seltzers are out there? There's too many seltzers. I can't keep up. They're most of them are all terrible. There's too many seltzers. Can we put that into legislation?
I mean, in the 90s, we kind of ignored the Zima world, and this is like Zima part two, right? And so I feel like this is a problem that y'all millennials are going to have to deal with.
Here's a random question for you. And you said you live in Portland. Why
I
are there
do.
so many things named after like fat animals? Like there's duck fat. There's some bakery that I can't remember the name of that bakery, but like I feel like everything's named after like ducks or something.
Well, duck fat actually cooks their food in duck fat.
Oh, they have good
So
fries.
it's kind of descriptive. I mean, I would put, I'd say there's a tie on the fries. They're like ranked one of the best fries in the country, apparently. But
With ranked choice or just no ranked choice?
I'm not sure how they ranked it. But there is another place, the Grill Room, that has really good fries too. That's just probably 5 blocks away, maybe 5 blocks away. So
Do any of the players on the Red Claws know who you are and what you're all about? And by that, I mean, have you just bumped into 7'6" Taco Fall when you're in Portland?
I don't like. They probably know who I am, and I know who some of they are, but we're not friends.
But you are friends with Spose, so I think that's all that matters.
I mean, we're friendly acquaintances. I don't think that either one of us is going to break pandemic to go hang out with the other.
I'd break pandemic to hang out with Spose.
He is lovely. Um, so yeah, I was on his podcast. But Maine's kind of it's a very small place, even for how big it is. It's a very small place. So even if I don't know somebody, I could probably get to them and vice versa. And that's actually one of the things I love about Maine. So I started law school. I lived in Philadelphia for a couple years, and the legal community down there is not what I would call supportive. And in Maine, you could pretty much, as an attorney, I could call any other attorney and be like, "Hey, I have a question," and I don't think I've ever had a call unreturned for one of those. So I love how collegial everybody is here, and we do get along even with, you know, um, the very interesting political demonstrations. Like if you drive around the state, you'd asked earlier about Trump. There are people who have quite literal shrines up that are self-created, and for other political groups too. I mean, you'll see some Democrats that have really gone enthusiastically towards their display homage. So um, I love that it's a small community here. I love that we all get along. I love that even if you don't know somebody, you could get to know them if you wanted to, and I don't think you can do that in a lot of places. So that's one of the great things about Maine.
Why do no politicians, even though they're supposed to be the men or women of their people, why are none of their DMs open?
Mine are.
I know yours are. This is,
I also follow like 10,000 people, and a whole bunch
I
of them are
know.
from Maine.
Like
I get punished for it too.
I've tried to get in contact with so many people to be like, hey, can you talk about why you have this stance on this? And there's no response. It's like, okay.
So I can't speak for everybody, but what I can tell you is generally most people in politics don't manage their own social media accounts. So the race that I was in 2018, I can tell you for a fact, like Jared Golden and Bruce Poliquin do not manage their own social media. Um, Lisa, in the race I'm in now, Lisa Savage sometimes manages her social media, but she has somebody to help her. Um, Max Lynn does not manage his own social media. Sarah Gideon and Susan Collins, they don't manage their, like they don't touch those accounts. So um, even if you got through to those accounts, most of the time you would not get those people.
Well, we appreciate your openness, and we definitely appreciated having you on. This was Pete. Do you have any questions?
I was gonna say, Tiffany, before I let you go, where can people follow you, find you, your websites, find out about your policies, find out all about? Just on like this is the part of the show where we just tell our guests plug away. Just plug
Sure.
away.
So you can find my policies online. My website is bond the number 4.me. I'm really boring, and I mean even and level, and you're probably going to read my stuff and go, yeah, that sounds reasonable. I think the things about me that sound the most radical are the main raising, that I don't take money, and also that I've sort of reset how folks think of moderate, because I am a moderate. But if you haven't taken action on things for a very long time, you start to sound a lot less moderate, even though that's the moderate position. So, for example, climate change, I probably sound to some extent for the left of the most left person in the race on some issues, because if you haven't maintained your roof for 30 years, you don't need a couple of shingles, you need a new roof is the problem. So I am very moderate, although some of my positions will sound a little bit drastic. They're playing catch up for years of not putting away and making wise policy choices. And they're where we would have come to if we had made wise policy choices. I'm easiest to find on Twitter, though you can email me through my website. My handle is just my name at Tiffany Bond. I made a conscious choice when I decided to get into politics to not be one of those puffy, really well polished, scrubbed accounts where you kind of have no idea who the candidate is, which is, every candidate pretty much. So you will see some personal statements there. You will see times where I think I'm being funny and I'm probably not being funny. You'll see stories occasionally about my kids and my dogs. You'll see comments about how I feel about different political issues. You'll see me talk about current law. So there's a whole range on there and a hodgepodge. It's not everybody's cup of tea. That's fine. And then if you want to get money out of politics, do a Maine raising. Just buy one thing from one small business in Maine anywhere. Leave a little note. This is Tiffany Bond, wouldn't take my money, so I'm doing a Maine raising. Look her up and vote for her for Senate. And, again, if 5 people do it, you got some good stuff. And if 100,000 people do it, it's election changing. Is there any questions that you wished you'd asked me, like whether it's on topic or off topic, just something you have a burning desire to know?
I mean, I already asked about the Maine red claw, so I don't know like what else I could possibly ask.
No, I mean, I was just surprised that we put this together so quickly. And when you said, sure, tell me about your podcast, I was like, okay. It's just randomly talk to people.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I would prefer to know that you're not like, pro-white nationalist or
Yeah,
something.
I was texting one of my
If
friends.
you're
I was like,
well,
yeah,
we're really into Nazis. I'd be like, nah, maybe not my podcast.
yeah. I was like, this is the first time I had to explain what this podcast was. And I had a hard time explaining it because it's a lot of nothing.
I've had to explain it to some other people too. I was trying to get there's some like random like indie band that I follow, and I just like DM'd them, wanted to come on, and they were just like, "We love podcasts. Send me like what you think are the best episodes." I'm like, oh, and they replied like so quickly, and I'm like, okay. And I like panicked, and I just like picked ones I think they were gonna like, and they're totally random. They got back to me going like, "Yeah, we'll do it. Just like let's find a time." So I'm currently working on that, but yeah, this is just this podcast has thrived on let's just send random DMs to people we think are interesting and let's have a good conversation. And it's yet to fail us because we got to do this and this has been so much fun. So thank you so much for coming on.
And we're not going to probably put any of this in. Is there like a specific charity or Maine raising thing that like you want us to put something towards? Like I'm going to put something towards something, but which one do you have a specific
Surprise me. Like find the most
Surprise you?
fun and interesting and cool thing you can
Okay.
about Maine. In fact, we should do that as a follow-up. You too can go do a Maine raising and find the coolest Maine product that you can. And then like after the election, we can get back together and we can talk about like the Maine product that we bought. I actually bought a whole bunch of stuff.
So we'll break quarantine and go to Portland and we'll go to
we
Holy
can do it
Donut
by
and spend
Zoom.
$50 at Holy Donut.
I was gonna spend $100 at Allagash
Holy Donut is
and be one of those obnoxious tourists on the boat.
Does Allagash count as Maine raising?
I mean, it could. Holy Donut, it's funny. I went to Holy Donut to get signatures because we have to get signatures to get on the ballot. And so I went in January because I was like, okay, January is when people from Maine go to tourist things. And at Holy Donut, it was still all tourists. Like, well, this isn't helping me. Like 1 out of every 4 or 5 people would actually be a Maine resident. And I was like, well, dang it.
So. Xander, can I leave this part in?
Sure.
No, I could chat about Maine all day. Maine it's a really lovely place to live. It's so much fun. We've got so many little quirks and it's eccentric in its own way. If you have the opportunity after the pandemic to come visit, please come up and visit. It's a great place. And I mean, that's the best part about Maine raising is you get to find all the wonderful little things from all over. And one of the best things for me, not just as as an attorney, I actually have a much bigger practice area than most people. I work all the way from Springvale up to Millinocket, which is about a 4-hour range of driving. And, one of my favorite things when I was campaigning is I got to do this even further. but every town has something just phenomenal about it, right? If you go to Belfast, for example, there is this croissant shop there that is just amazing. And I'm glad I don't live near because I gain 5 pounds a month. But, every little town has something fantastic. And we have over 500 little towns. So
Awesome. Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us. It was great having you on.